There's something we all carry. It's invisible, but it shows up in the way we speak, in the choices we make, and in how we see ourselves when no one's watching. It's our past. And for so many of us, we've been carrying it like it's a verdict, like it's a life sentence, like it gets to decide who we are, who we become, and what we deserve. But let me tell you something. With every fiber of my being, your past is not a prison. It's a classroom, and it does not get to write your future. We all walk through life carrying stories that most people never see. They show up in the way we hesitate before speaking up in a meeting. They echo in the way we apologize for taking up space. They linger in the way we over-explain, overperform, or simply shrink to stay safe. These behaviors, these adaptations, they didn't come out of nowhere. They were learned, they were practiced, and they were rooted in something that happened before. This is what the past does when we haven't made peace with it. It writes scripts we follow without even realizing it. But the truth is, the past was never meant to be a cage. It was meant to be a classroom. And yet so many of us treat it like a sentence we're serving. We define ourselves by our wounds instead of our healing. We become loyal to pain because it feels familiar. It's ironic, isn't it? The very experiences that were hardest to live through become the ones we feel obligated to carry forever. Like letting go would mean we're minimizing them. Like moving on would somehow betray what we went through. But here's the truth. Honoring your story doesn't mean chaining yourself to it. Growth is not betrayal. It's reverence in motion. See, when we shift our mindset from punishment to learning, everything changes. Instead of looking at a difficult chapter and thinking, this broke me, we start to ask, what did this teach me? That question doesn't erase the pain, it reframes it. It doesn't gloss over what happened. In fact, it often demands that we look even closer. But this time, we do it with curiosity instead of condemnation. This time, we ask not why me, but what now? And listen, I get it. Some of us were handed chapters that feel impossible to hold. Abuse, abandonment, deep loss, betrayal, trauma. These aren't just bruises, they're breaks. So when I talk about the past being a classroom, I want to be clear. I'm not romanticizing suffering. Pain isn't a prerequisite for wisdom. You didn't have to suffer to be worthy of growth. But for those of us who did suffer, the invitation now is to reclaim power by asking, can I use what I've been through to become more of who I truly am? Because here's the danger of treating the past like a prison. You start building your identity around survival. You build walls instead of bridges. You don't dream because dreaming requires risk. You don't connect deeply because connection demands vulnerability. And when you see yourself only as someone who endured, you forget that you're also someone who creates, someone who is still becoming, someone who still gets to choose. That's what the classroom metaphor does. It reminds us that we are students of our own stories. We get to ask hard questions. We get to seek deeper truths. And most importantly, we get to evolve. That evolution might not be loud. It might look like forgiving someone who never apologized. It might look like setting a boundary that leaves you trembling. It might look like finally saying, I'm not who I was back then, and I don't have to be. Learning from the past is messy. It's non-linear. Some days you'll feel 10 steps ahead, and then something triggers you, and suddenly you're back in the middle of the memory. That doesn't mean you failed. That means you're human. Class is still in session. And healing doesn't look like a straight line. It looks like showing up again and again with gentleness and grit. It looks like choosing to face the discomfort instead of numbing it. It looks like asking for help when silence feels safer. So no, your past is not a prison. It does not hold the keys to your worth, your identity, or your future. But if you let it, it can be a classroom, a sacred space where you unlearn shame and relearn self-compassion, where you stop hiding and start honoring, where you stop bracing for impact and start building something brave. The pain may be part of your origin story, but it is not the whole narrative. And the lesson is this. You're allowed to grow beyond what hurt you, and you are absolutely, unequivocally allowed to rewrite the story. We all have moments in our lives we'd like to forget, moments where we didn't show up as our best selves, where we made choices that hurt ourselves or others, or when we were overwhelmed by fear or shame. These moments are heavy. They linger. They replay in your mind like an endless loop. You think to yourself, that's me. That defines me. I'll never escape this version of myself. But here's the truth. That moment is not who you are. The temptation to define ourselves by our worst moments is one of the most insidious ways shame keeps us stuck. The truth is, our worst moments are not a reflection of our worth or our entire story. In fact, they often have nothing to do with our character at all. They are simply a snapshot, one fleeting moment in time that doesn't tell the whole story. When we define ourselves by a mistake we made or a failure we experienced, we shrink our entire identity down to the narrowest version of ourselves. We trap ourselves in a box as if we are only capable of being that one moment. But that's simply not true. You are not the worst thing you've ever done. And here's why it's crucial to separate your history from your identity, because you cannot move forward if you keep living in the past. When we carry the weight of our mistakes, when we see them as something that defines us, it becomes impossible to step into the fullness of who we are meant to be. We start second-guessing every decision we make, afraid we'll mess up again. We start questioning our own worth, believing we're unworthy of love, success, or happiness because of that one moment. But this mindset, this self-imposed limitation, isn't rooted in truth. It's rooted in fear. Now, I'm not suggesting you should erase the past, pretend it didn't happen, or avoid the consequences of your actions. What I am saying is this: you are not the sum of your mistakes. You are not defined by the worst thing you've ever done, nor are you defined by the worst thing someone else has ever done to you. Your actions don't define you. They are part of your journey, and that journey is ever changing. You can learn from your past without becoming imprisoned by it. In fact, the most powerful thing you can do is to embrace that you are a work in progress. There's so much more to you than the mistakes you've made. Those mistakes were moments in time. The truth is, your value is inherent. Your worth was never tied to your performance, your achievements, or your failures. You are valuable because you exist. And that is the foundation of everything else. One of the most important things we can do in our healing journey is to take a step back and look at ourselves with compassion. When we look at our worst moments with compassion, when we view them as mistakes made by a human being, not as the definitive mark of our character, it's much easier to forgive ourselves and move on. When we see our past with empathy, we stop using it as a weapon to punish ourselves. Instead, we treat ourselves with the love and understanding we would offer to a close friend who's gone through something similar. Let's be clear. This is not about excusing bad behavior or avoiding accountability. Accountability is critical for growth, but it's about recognizing that your past behavior doesn't get to determine who you are today or who you can become tomorrow. Your mistakes don't define your worth. Your courage to change does. When you choose to face your flaws with honesty, acknowledge your mistakes, and take responsibility for them, that's when you start to reclaim your power. That's when you stop being defined by your history and start being defined by your ability to grow. Shifting from defining yourself by your worst moment to recognizing that you are a multifaceted, evolving human being opens up an entirely new possibility for your life. You stop holding on to the weight of shame. You start believing in the possibility of change. You start acting from a place of empowerment, not from a place of fear that you're somehow irrevocably damaged. You start making decisions based on the kind of person you're becoming, not on the mistakes you've made. Let me say this clearly. You do not need to carry your worst moments with you forever. You can make amends, you can learn, you can grow, but you can also forgive yourself. You can release the guilt and the shame that holds you back. And once you do that, you begin to build a new narrative, one that is grounded in self-compassion, growth, and hope for the future. You are not defined by the sum of your failures. You are defined by your capacity to keep learning, keep evolving, and keep showing up no matter the scars you carry. We all have stories. Some of them are handed down to us from the people who raised us. Some come from the experiences we've lived through, while others are the stories we've created in our minds. These stories are powerful. They shape the way we see ourselves, the world, and the relationships we build. The problem arises when we start believing that these stories are fixed, unchangeable, and permanent. The truth is, the stories we tell ourselves about the past are not permanent truths. They are just that, stories. And just like any story, they can be edited, rewritten, and reframed. But for many of us, we hold onto these stories as if they define who we are. Maybe the story you tell yourself is that you're not enough. Maybe you tell yourself that you'll never be worthy of love or success because of the mistakes you made. Maybe you tell yourself that because you were abandoned or hurt in the past, you're unlovable or unworthy of real connection. These stories, while deeply ingrained, are just interpretations of what happened, not the final truth about who you are. And here's the most powerful part. You have the power to rewrite them. When we keep telling ourselves a story over and over again, it becomes our truth. It becomes our lens, the way we see everything and everyone around us. But when we stop and ask ourselves, is this story really true? Does it serve me? Does it reflect the whole truth of who I am and who I am becoming? We begin to realize that these narratives are not fixed. They are fluid. They can be rewritten with intention, compassion, and a commitment to growth. Think about the stories we tell about our past mistakes. Many of us have the tendency to define ourselves by our failures or moments of regret. We hold on to the belief that we are somehow broken or flawed because of the things we've done or the ways we've been hurt. We tell ourselves that those moments are the definitive chapters of our lives. But what if instead of defining yourself by a single chapter, you began to view your life as a whole story? What if you saw your mistakes not as markers of failure, but as lessons, as opportunities for growth? What if you started seeing your struggles as part of your story, not the entire story? The key to rewriting your past is to start with self-compassion. This doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior or pretending that nothing bad ever happened, but it means treating yourself with kindness and understanding as you would a friend who was in the same situation. It means recognizing that the mistakes you made in the past don't define your worth. It means accepting that you are more than what happened to you or what you did. Self-compassion allows you to acknowledge the pain, the mistakes, and the heartache, while also acknowledging that you are more than those moments. You are a person who has the capacity to learn, to change, and to grow. The next step in rewriting your story is to challenge the narrative you've been telling yourself. Ask yourself, what other interpretations of this experience are possible? What lessons can I learn from this? How has this experience shaped me but not broken me? When you start to see the events of your life as moments that have taught you something rather than defined you, you open yourself up to growth. The more you challenge the negative narratives, the more you start to see that there's another version of the story that is grounded in strength, resilience, and the ability to move forward. And let's be real, rewriting our stories is hard. It's not as easy as flipping a switch or saying, I'm going to stop thinking this way. It takes time. It requires us to sit with discomfort and be willing to face the truth of who we are, our flaws, our imperfections, our vulnerability. But rewriting your story is also one of the most courageous things you can do. It requires you to embrace vulnerability and step into the unknown. It requires you to trust that you are capable of growth, even when it feels uncertain. The beauty of rewriting your story is that it frees you. It frees you from being held hostage by your past. It gives you the freedom to grow, to make mistakes, and to learn without fear of judgment. When you stop believing that your past defines you, you begin to see the infinite possibilities for who you can become. You no longer need to be constrained by the weight of your history. Instead, you become the author of your own narrative, and that means you can decide how the next chapter unfolds. When you start rewriting your story, you begin to see yourself through a different lens. Instead of seeing yourself as the person who failed or made mistakes, you begin to see yourself as the person who survived, who learned, who evolved. You stop identifying with the hurt and start identifying with the healing. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstance and start seeing yourself as a creator of possibility. And that shift is everything. But remember, this is a process. Rewriting your story doesn't mean erasing the past or pretending it didn't happen. It means acknowledging the truth of your experience and choosing to see it through the lens of growth and transformation. It means seeing yourself as a work in progress, beautifully flawed and perfectly human. And it means knowing that no matter what you've been through, your story is still being written. When we go through trauma or hardship, our survival instincts kick in. We adapt. We protect ourselves. We do whatever it takes to make it through the storm. And in many cases, that version of us, the version that was built to survive, is the one that carries us through the darkest times. But here's the thing. The version of you that survived is not the version of you that will thrive. We often think that the person who got us through the pain, the person who fought through every obstacle, is the person we have to stay. That survival mode becomes so ingrained that we start to define ourselves by it. We tell ourselves that we're not allowed to evolve past it, that we have to stay stuck in the person who is constantly on guard, the person who is always preparing for the next blow. But the truth is, you are not meant to live in survival mode forever. You were made to grow, to expand, and to become the person you were always meant to be. When we're in survival mode, we're focused on getting through. Every decision, every move is about minimizing pain and keeping ourselves safe. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that instinctual drive to protect ourselves is a testament to our resilience and strength. But here's the problem. When we stay stuck in that survival mindset, we begin to shrink ourselves. We stop believing in our ability to thrive. We start playing small because we're too afraid of stepping outside of what's familiar, of what's safe. But you don't have to stay in that version of yourself forever. You're allowed to evolve. You are allowed to grow past the version of you that only existed to survive. The first step in this process is recognizing that survival mode, while necessary for a time, is not the end of the story. It's a chapter, not the whole book. And while you may have needed that protective layer in the past, it's time to realize that you no longer have to live in the shadow of fear. You can shed that protective shell and embrace vulnerability, openness, and possibility. Survival mode was there to protect you, but it's not who you are at your core. You are worthy of more than just getting by. You are worthy of joy, connection, love, and fulfillment. And those things require a willingness to step outside of the walls you've built around yourself. One of the most difficult things about growing past the version of you that survived is the fear of losing control. When you're in survival mode, you have a tight grip on everything. You monitor your emotions, your interactions, and your environment to make sure you're not caught off guard. But growth requires trust. It requires the ability to let go of the need to control everything and trust that you can handle what comes next. Letting go of control doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're strong enough to trust yourself, even when things feel uncertain. Letting go of the survival mindset doesn't happen overnight. It's a process that involves acknowledging the fear, the grief, and the trauma that built that version of you. You have to be willing to face those parts of yourself that were once protected and hidden. But here's the beauty of it. When you allow yourself to feel those emotions and confront them with compassion, you create space for healing. You create space for the version of you who doesn't just survive, but who thrives. You create space for the real you to emerge, the you that has always been there, waiting to be set free. As you begin to let go of survival mode, you also start to realize that growth requires embracing discomfort. Growth is not always easy. It requires you to step into the unknown, to take risks, and to challenge the beliefs that have kept you in a state of protection. The version of you that survived had to be cautious, guarded, and ready for anything. But the version of you that thrives knows that vulnerability is not weakness, it's strength. It knows that growth comes from showing up, even when it's hard, even when you're afraid. The most empowering thing about growing past the version of you that survived is that you are not limited by your past. Your survival instincts were a response to what you went through, but they do not define your future. You are not a prisoner of your experiences. You are a creator of your own life. You get to decide who you want to be from this moment forward. The version of you that survived was amazing and strong, but the version of you that's evolving is even more powerful. She or he is someone who has learned, healed, and is now ready to step into the fullness of their potential. Growth isn't about rejecting the past. It's about integrating the lessons learned and moving forward with new strength and wisdom. It's about using your survival story as the foundation for your thriving story. The version of you that survived was necessary, but the version of you that thrives is the person you were always meant to become. This new version of you has the capacity to embrace vulnerability, to set healthy boundaries, to take risks, and to truly step into your power. At the core of every human being lies a universal need, the need to love and be loved, to belong, to feel like we are seen and valued, not for what we do, but for who we are. This need is so deeply ingrained in us that it shapes our relationships, our sense of self-worth, and the way we navigate the world. But here's the problem. We often forget that we are worthy of love and belonging, no matter what we've been through. We think that our past mistakes, our failures, or our scars somehow disqualify us from receiving the love we so deeply crave. We believe that because we have been hurt, betrayed, or broken, we are no longer deserving of connection. But that's simply not true. The truth is, you are worthy of love and belonging exactly as you are right now. It doesn't matter what you've been through. It doesn't matter how many times you've stumbled or fallen. It doesn't matter how much pain you've carried or how much you've doubted yourself. You are worthy of love and belonging simply because you are human. Your worth is inherent. It is not contingent on your perfection, your success, or your ability to always get it right. It is because you are you that you deserve to be loved, seen, and embraced. The need for love and belonging runs so deep that when we feel disconnected or unworthy, it can feel like a fundamental part of us is missing. It's easy to internalize the belief that we are not enough because we were told that we weren't, or because we have evidence of moments in our lives when we were abandoned, rejected, or left to fend for ourselves. We see ourselves through the lens of the pain we've experienced, and we begin to think that the broken parts of us somehow make us unworthy of true connection. But the reality is that our brokenness is not a barrier to love. It's a testament to our resilience. It is through those cracks that love, compassion, and belonging can enter. You are worthy because you are still here. The shame we carry about not being enough can be paralyzing. It tells us that we're not deserving of support, of compassion, or of people seeing us for who we truly are. We start to feel like we need to earn love, to prove ourselves worthy, to be perfect before we can belong. But this is a lie. Love is not something that needs to be earned or proven. It is something that is freely given. And the best part, it's given to us because of who we are, not because of anything we do. You don't have to be perfect or even healed to receive love. You are worthy of it in your entirety. Your flaws, your mistakes, your scars, your vulnerability. Belonging is not about fitting in or conforming to someone else's standards. It's not about pretending to be something you're not in order to be accepted. True belonging happens when you show up as your authentic self without apology. It's about being seen, not for the persona you've created to protect yourself, but for the person you truly are underneath. And when you embrace yourself fully, imperfections and all, that's when you'll find the people who are meant to love you. You belong not because you've earned it, but because you exist. And there's power in that. But let's be honest, feeling worthy of love and belonging isn't always easy, especially when we've been hurt in the past. Our wounds often make us believe that we're unlovable, that something is fundamentally wrong with us. We start to feel like we'll always be the person who doesn't fit in, the one who's left out, the one who isn't chosen. And while those feelings are valid, they don't define you. You are not your wounds. Your scars don't make you unworthy of love. They make you human. They make you resilient. They make you someone who has the capacity to give and receive love in a way that only someone who has been through hard things can. The road to accepting that you are worthy of love and belonging requires forgiveness, both for others and for yourself. Forgiving others is often the easier part, but forgiving yourself, that's where the real healing happens. It's about acknowledging the pain, the mistakes, and the things you wish had been different, and still choosing to believe that you deserve love. It's about letting go of the self-criticism and self-doubt that holds you hostage. When you forgive yourself, you open the door to unconditional love. The kind that doesn't require earning, but simply being. Lastly, it's important to remember that we are all deserving of love and belonging, even when it feels like we're the only ones who don't get it. It's easy to look around and see others in loving relationships surrounded by friends and community and feel like you're the odd one out, but you are not alone. There is always space for you. There are people who see you. There are people who will love you for exactly who you are, even on your hardest days. Your worth is not determined by the approval of others. It is determined by the fact that you are a human being deserving of connection. We live in a world that often tells us to hide our vulnerability, to protect ourselves, and to avoid showing our true selves. Vulnerability is often mistaken for weakness, something to be ashamed of or avoided at all costs. We're told that being strong means putting up walls, keeping our emotions in check, and pretending we've got it all together. But here's the truth. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is power. It is the very thing that allows us to connect with others, to grow, and to step into the fullness of who we are. At its core, vulnerability is about being open to uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. It's about showing up in the world as your true self, even when you don't know how things will turn out. It's about being real, even when it's uncomfortable or messy. And while it may feel scary to let down your guard and show your emotions, it is this very act of vulnerability that allows us to experience the depth of human connection. Without vulnerability, we cannot truly love, be loved, or create meaningful relationships. Vulnerability is what makes us human. For so many of us, the idea of vulnerability can be terrifying. We've been taught that to be vulnerable is to be weak or to risk being hurt. We've been conditioned to believe that we have to keep it together at all times, to hide our imperfections and struggles from the world. But the truth is, vulnerability is actually where our greatest strength lies. It's the courage to show up even when we feel scared. It's the bravery to speak our truth even when it's difficult. It's the willingness to be seen even when we don't have all the answers. In fact, it is only through vulnerability that we find our true strength, because true strength is not about being invulnerable. It's about having the courage to be vulnerable. When we embrace vulnerability, we open ourselves up to growth. It is only by being vulnerable that we can truly learn and evolve. Think about it. Growth requires discomfort. It requires stepping outside of what feels safe, challenging old beliefs, and confronting the parts of ourselves that we've tried to hide. Vulnerability is what allows us to learn from our mistakes, face our fears, and heal our wounds. It's through vulnerability that we can step into new possibilities for ourselves, both personally and professionally. The people who achieve the most are not the ones who avoid vulnerability, but the ones who lean into it, embrace it, and learn from it. Vulnerability also plays a key role in our ability to connect with others. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we create space for others to do the same. We show people that it's okay to be imperfect, to struggle, and to ask for help. Vulnerability fosters empathy and understanding. It builds trust. It's the foundation of authentic relationships. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we give others permission to do the same. And in doing so, we create communities, workplaces, and families where people feel safe to be themselves, where they feel accepted and loved just as they are. This is where true belonging happens, when we allow ourselves to be real with each other. Another important aspect of vulnerability is that it is the key to creativity and innovation. When we're vulnerable, we open ourselves up to new ideas, new experiences, and new ways of thinking. We're willing to take risks and try things that may not work out because we understand that failure is just part of the process. In fact, failure is often the gateway to success. It is only by embracing vulnerability, by being willing to fail, to struggle, and to fall short, that we can truly push the boundaries of what's possible. Vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation because it's the willingness to step into the unknown, to experiment, and to risk failure in the pursuit of something greater. Many of us fear that if we're vulnerable, we'll be judged or criticized. We fear that others will see our flaws and use them against us. And while that fear is real, it's also important to recognize that our vulnerability will not make us weaker. It will make us stronger. When we choose to be vulnerable, we are reclaiming our power. We are saying, I am enough as I am, imperfections and all. We're acknowledging that we don't need to be perfect to be worthy of love, success, or happiness. Vulnerability is the ultimate act of self-acceptance. It's the acknowledgement that we don't have to hide who we are because who we are is enough. The last and perhaps most important reason vulnerability is so powerful is because it allows us to live authentically. In a world that constantly pressures us to be something we're not, to fit into a mold, to follow a script, vulnerability is the act of saying, "This is me, take it or leave it." It is a refusal to conform to other people's expectations or to suppress our true selves. It's the act of stepping into the world with confidence, knowing that our worth is not based on how others see us, but on how we see ourselves. When we embrace vulnerability, we embrace the freedom to live authentically, unapologetically, and fully. The journey toward embracing vulnerability, rewriting our stories, and growing beyond the versions of ourselves that survived is not an easy one. It requires courage, patience, and a willingness to step into the unknown. But as we've seen, the power lies in our ability to show up fully, authentically, and with compassion for ourselves and others. You are worthy of love and belonging, regardless of what you've been through. Your vulnerability is not a weakness. It's the greatest source of your strength. As you step into the fullness of who you are, remember this: you are enough, just as you are. You have the capacity to rewrite your story, to break free from the chains of the past, and to embrace a future filled with growth, connection, and fulfillment. The person you were always meant to be is waiting for you to take the first step toward becoming them. So take a deep breath, trust yourself, and lean into vulnerability. It's through those moments of openness, of stepping into the discomfort, that you will discover your true power. Embrace it, own it, and remember that you are worthy of every beautiful thing that lies ahead. You are enough. You are worthy. And the world is waiting to see the magic you bring when you finally show up as your true, authentic self.